Hi, this is Jay Taylor, and this is Dante's Disciples. I'm going to be continuing Stay Away from Tauerpin Road, Part 3. I want to thank Random Appellation 468 for writing the story and allowing me to narrate. Make sure you check him out on Reddit Nosleep to read his work. And I want to thank you for listening to a human narrator. As you know, there's so many AI narration channels right now that are doing so well, and I appreciate you giving this guy a chance. I'm always trying to find ways to improve the quality of the stories, but enough of me talking. Let's get to me talking about the story. I've been dreading this moment. Everything up to this point was a play-by-play of the worst moments of my existence. And I know I'm not ready to recount this part. But what other choice do I have? This needs to end. And it can't until the entire tale is told. In the chaotic darkness, a shotgun racked, and the 12-gauge sang into the night with defiance. The big one howled and jerked its arm back through the opening, the sudden movement enough to send a section of the stairwell behind us crumbling down. The chasm yawned, more of the steps collapsed, and I heard the collective shriek of the puppets' horde as they were buried under the falling rubble. "Now's our chance." Mark pushed me up the remaining stairs. "Get to the..." Crash. Like a freight train of blind rage, the clenched fist of the big one exploded through the wall, and Mark flew sideways. Unable to keep my feet, I pulled myself into a recess on the rough, cold cement in an effort to keep from being crushed. Rain and wind trickled in from the gap in the tower, and against the backdrop of lightning, I realized I sat at shoulder height to the enormous gray visage. The red light from my headlamp caught its face, and I recoiled in terror. Crouched low to peer into the gap, the big one studied me without eyes, its face a mass of tangled, gnarled tree branches all woven together. Something hummed in the back of my brain, a whining that pried into every fold of my thoughts and paralyzed my limbs. Whispers rose in the static, soft voices that urged me not to fight, to stay still, that it was so much sweeter on the other side, that the pain wouldn't last long. I wouldn't feel it after a while. So warm and dry, it'd be just like falling asleep. Sleep sounds good. I could sleep. Maybe it won't hurt if I just... A bright orange glow flared to life, and the static fizzled out. My head pounded with a sudden migraine, and a wave of nausea roiled in my guts. To my right, Mark slumped against the far wall, holding a green glass bottle with a flaming rag tied to the neck of it. Rivulets of blood poured down from a gash on his scalp, and his right leg lay twisted at a horrible angle. But Mark wound his arm back and hurled the bottle with all the energy he had left. Yellow flames exploded over the tangled branches of its face, and the big one reeled with an agonized screech. Awash in fire, the creature stampeded for the nearby tree line, its bellows louder than the storm that raged overhead. All around its feet, those puppets that hadn't been buried in the collapsed stairwell scurried away in hasty retreat. Lightning snapped, the thunder boomed, and all at once everything fell silent again, save for the ancient mutterings of the wind and the rain. I fell forward onto my hands and knees and puked over the edge of the ruined stairwell, the dark rubble below swallowing the vomit with cruel indifference. Cold crept through me now. The adrenaline wore off, and I realized how much black gore was smeared over my face, arms, chest, and hands. I beat that one girl to death. I crushed her face with a rock. Dear God, what's happening to me? With both eyes shut, I pictured my dad at the gun range teaching me how to shoot. His words about surviving bad situations. You gotta stay calm, Maddie. No matter what, stay calm. Breathe and act. If you do that, you'll be okay. Gotta go. I sucked in a deep breath and forced myself not to gag at the taste of bile in my mouth. Mark, we have to go. He didn't respond. My knees almost gave out the first time I stood up, and I had to brace myself against the ruined wall. Exhaustion threatened to bring me down, and my ears throbbed as if someone had shoved needles down inside them. Still, I turned back to my friend and groped to find the switch on my headlamp. Click. I slapped one filthy hand over my mouth to stifle another wave of nausea. In the scarlet light, Mark's blood looked black, and it pooled on the cement beneath him. Bright white bone stuck out from his snapped leg, the end jagged and slick. Mark's eyes were shut, one half of his face red with blood, the other pale as new-fallen snow. Mark! I squeaked the words out, too afraid to admit what I suspected to be true. Mark, please say something. His head rolled limply on the one shoulder, and my heart skipped a frantic beat. The bags. I scrambled for my green satchel, tore it apart in search of something to help. My hands smeared black goo over everything, but I didn't care. There had to be something, either in his kit or mine, to fix this. A small green nylon pouch surfaced, and I saw a little red cross stitched onto the flap. Yes! In spite of everything, I shouted with joy and hugged the little pack to my chest. My clumsy, cold fingers struggled to unzip it, and I pawed through its contents until I found a black tourniquet, like the ones my father stockpiled in our basement for the day the world decided to end. I'd hardly paid attention when he'd showed me how to use them, but the instructions still resonated in my mind, and I decided that if I ever got home, I'd hug Dad so hard his ribs would break. High and tight. I gritted my teeth and laced the strap around Mark's thigh, well above the shattered femur, yanking it as hard as I could, and tried not to think about how Mark didn't even groan in pain as I wound the little metal windlass to staunch the tide of glistening blood. Somewhere in the distance, another whale-like bellow echoed, and I swallowed a nervous, bile-flavored lump. We can make it. I talked to him, more to keep from crying than anything else, and slid my shoulder under Mark's armpit. Come on, get up, come on. But no matter how much I strained, I couldn't lift him. My leg muscles shot from the terrified run through the fields, Mark's 170-pound frame like a fallen log. I clawed the gray rucksack off his back, along with the red duffel bag, and tossed aside the green shoulder bag he'd given me. I strained, screamed in desperation, but fell to my knees spent. A glimpse at his face sent an icy chill down my spine again, and I put 2 fingers to Mark's throat. Stupid idiot. I should have checked sooner. Panicked, I rolled Mark onto his back on the cold concrete and pressed my hands to his sternum, my brain fog of fear. Mark, you have to wake. Come on. Big. I pumped at his chest, put my ear to his mouth and listened. Nothing. You can't do that. I spat, angry and scared, tears brimming in my eyes. You can't leave me, you just can't. Again and again, I leaned on his diaphragm. And this time, I lifted Mark's chin to put my mouth to his. Every bit of guilt and shame rushed back to choke me at the sensation of his soft lips on mine. But I had to fight through it to breathe air into his lungs. My arms began to cramp. Seconds passed. My despair grew. Mark wasn't moving, wasn't breathing, and his pulse. Please, God, don't do this. I am so sorry. I've been such a fool, but please don't take him. Not like this. Please. My brain began to accept the inevitable, and tears streamed down my face, along with the cold rain, salty and bitter. This was all my fault. If I hadn't come back this year, hadn't stayed too long after work, hadn't stopped to talk to him in the parking lot, Mark wouldn't have been here. He saved me, cared for me, forgiven me, and after everything, I'd led him to his death. I didn't deserve that kind of love. I didn't deserve Mark Petrick. Giving up, I dropped my head to his chest, my wet hair hanging in curtains around my grimy face. Maddie. I jerked back with a muffled scream of surprise. Mark blinked up at me, his face almost gray, but his eyes still warm, chocolate brown. Are you okay? Unable to speak through my relieved sobs, I threw my arms around his shoulders and curled up beside him on the cold cement. Mark slid one sluggish arm around me, and I relished what little warmth I could feel coming from his chest beneath the layers of waterlogged clothes. Can't stay here, he grunted into my ear, and Mark winced as though the pain had at least started to set in. You can't stay. I pressed my face to his collarbone and shook my head like a stubborn child. I am not going without you. His fingers squeezed my arm in earnest, though his strength seemed to wane by the minute. Yes, you are. If that thing comes back, it will rip this place apart, and you won't make it to the exit. So you have to leave me here. No. I clung to him even harder, and my voice cracked like a glass dropped from a skyscraper. I'll fight it. I'll use one of your firebombs. That was the last one, he sighed, and something about the way he sounded, so tired, so weak, made my chest throb. And it just made it angry. You have to go, or it'll kill you. He laced his fingers into my hair, the braid long gone, the strands now wild tangles around my neck. Mark pulled, in a gentle but insistent pull, and I brought my head up to meet his gaze. In the dark, with the wind and rain whipping outside our hovel, the lightning slithered through the sky. In the dark, with the rain and wind whipping outside our hovel, the lightning slithered through the sky and revealed Mark's thin smile. You can do it. You just have to stay focused. Do you still have your gun? Shame burned across my cheeks. I think I lost it in the field. That's fine. He rolled his head to nod at the far wall, which still bore his bloodstains. Take my shotgun. Got more slugs for it in my coat. And my knife. You'll need it. My eyes stung with fresh waves of remorse, and I went to shake my head, but Mark's touch on my face stopped me, his calloused fingers wiping away the tears. You'll be all right. Come on. Get my ruck. And the red bag, too. My arms and legs seemed to move on their own, and I crawled over to lug the bag to Mark. The 12 gauge was covered in concrete dust, with dents and scratches on its wooden stock, but otherwise remained functional, and I slugged the heavy weapon over my shoulder like I'd seen him do. Put the gun across your chest. Mark nudged his folded gray jacket my way, along with the silver-colored camping knife from his belt, and grimaced as though the pain intensified with every move he made. You'll have to drop from high up and roll on your back. You don't want to break your spine on that thing. Drop? I choked, fear and pain mingling in my head. What do you mean? Mark flicked his eyes up the dark stairs above us. There's a room at the top of the tower with 4 windows all around it. There should be a stack of harnesses under one of them. Once you put one on, hitch it to the cable and ride it like a zip line across to the opposite field. At the end, the line stops about 10 feet off the ground. You'll have to cut yourself loose and then drop down. My throat turned dry, but I pulled his jacket on over my slender shoulders and tried to focus on his instructions, even as apocalyptic footsteps echoed in the tree line not far away. Okay, then what? If you made the sacrifice right, you should be able to see a light from the base of the cable pole. Head for that. There's going to be a lot of freaks hanging around the exit, so run like the wind and don't look back. Both eyebrows hitched higher on my face, and a word stuck out among all others. Sacrifice? Wait, what sacrifice? Mark made a grim, stoic nod. Usually, if you want to leave here, you have to give up something really important to you. Something you can't replace. I had to leave my heirloom pocket watch behind last time Randy came to get me. He had to leave his wedding band. My heart sank. I had left my necklace at home in my room, and with nothing in my pockets but a cheap flashlight and an old candy wrapper, I would be trapped. But I don't have anything. He met my confusion with an apologetic smile, and I realized what Mark meant. No! It came out as a whimper more than a scream, my soul writhing from the terrible truth. But Mark gripped my wrist with a desperate gleam in his eyes. I can't make the jump, not with my leg like this. You've got nothing to give, and you can't carry me and make the sprint at the end. But if I stay, I should be enough to get you through. I won't go without you. Shaking off his grasp, I tried to be angry, but only felt more miserable by the second. This couldn't be happening. It just couldn't. He cupped my chin, and despite myself, I leaned into his touch. The palm, still warm enough to make my spine tingle, in that pleasant way I hadn't known was possible. And I won't let you die here. Mark ran his thumb over my cheek in a tenderness that made a guilty fire blaze inside my heart. Now hurry up. We don't have much time. Trying to hold myself together, I sorted through the dirty, torn bags, all while fighting the fog of hypothermia that threatened to creep into my brain. Gotta stay awake. I can't pass out now. Mark drew a shuddery breath and cringed at his mutilated leg. In the top flap, there's a road flare. I need it. I found it. A brown cardboard-wrapped tube with a red cap on one end. Too numb to be confused, I handed him the flare and heard the plastic clatter to the concrete floor. Instantly, we both knew exactly what it was. Mark nodded at the little plastic hairbrush, his eyes softening. Would you? Sure. I placed it in Mark's cold grasp, and my heart ached at how he clutched the brush to his chest with tender affection. He's losing her. No more Claire. No more kids. No farmhouse in the woods. He is losing everything. All because of me. Mark shut his eyes, sniffled, and held the brush out to me. Take this when you go. Another wave of nausea slammed into me, and I whipped my head back and forth. No, I can't. Maddie, please. His voice broke, halfway between begging and groaning in agony from his wounds. I don't want it stuck here too. Take it to Claire and tell her that I held onto Mark like he was an anchor, keeping me from going adrift in the storm. I know. I will tell her, I promise. He pushed the brush into my left hand, his own still wielded to my right, and a volcano rose inside my brain. I wasn't just looking at Mark Petrick, my goofy friend from work who liked my cupcakes and my terrible karaoke. The man lying beside me meant more to me than all of that, and it hit me now just what I was losing. I'm sorry. It exploded from me at last. A cascade of emotion all tangled into one giant mess. The hot tears on my face, every breath short and excruciating. I didn't know what else to say. I couldn't put my feelings into words now when it mattered most, but I knew that I cared for him more than ever before. I was sorry that I'd let this happen. Sorry I'd not stayed in my car. Sorry I brushed him off in the parking lot. And I was so very sorry that all those months ago, I turned away my one chance to be more than Mark Petrick's friend from Carnivore Cove. Don't. His fingers tightened on mine, and Mark let slide a sympathetic grin that held flickers of something deeper, remnants of feeling that drove nails into my heart. You had nothing to be sorry for. You're here, and that's all that matters. Now help me up. Watching my arms move almost independent of myself, I propped him against the wall, hating every second of it. Mark pulled the red duffel bag closed and unzipped it to reveal a massive metal pressure cooker coated with nails and tape, a bundle of wires that led to some big square batteries, and a repurposed digital stopwatch. Outside, the footsteps thundered closer, and the screeches returned, the horde of puppets ready to finish the job. I wish I had more time. One more minute or one more day, just one. Even if it meant watching him with Claire, I'd be okay with that. I shouldered the big green bag and turned from the steps to look back at Mark. He struck the end of the flare to ignite it, and the stairwell bathed in its blood-red light. He threw me a warm, handsome smile for the last time. You're still one in a million, Maddie. Doing my best to grin through my waterfall of tears, I felt my heart tear in half inside of me. Goodbye, Mark. With that, I smothered a mournful sob and sped up the stairs. Shadows closed in around me in accusatory sheets, and the tears smeared with Mark's red blood on my cheek to form a bitter avalanche of regret. Everything seemed to move in slow motion now that seconds counted, and I wanted nothing more than to wake up in my own bed and discover this entire nightmare was over. A colossal, baleen roar rumbled through the earth. Even as I charged through a small metal door at the top of the stairs and skidded to a halt in surprise. Unlike everywhere else in this hellscape road, the small square room was dry, its windows mysteriously intact, and all around the mundane cement walls lay heaps of random items. Pictures, rings, a golden pocket watch that I suspected was Mark's, and various other trinkets sat in reverent heaps, like treasure in the tomb of some ancient civilization. A hollow sensation tore through me at the thought that my sacrifice lay only 17 steps down from here, with gentle hands, a kind smile, and chocolate brown eyes that melted me every time. Focus, the cable, Find the cable. To one side, a pile of dusty, multicolored harnesses caught my eye, like the kind we had for the zipline attractions at New Wilderness. It had been a while since I'd been on a zipline, but I didn't have much of a choice. I picked one, yellow, Mark's favorite color, and stepped into it. Rabid cries floated up from the ground outside, and a shadowy figure strode into view, fixated on the red glow of Mark's flare. Shoving open the window above the stack of harnesses, I braced my hands against the dry, rotted frame and leaned out into the icy wind. There, above me, a braided steel cable ran from a heavy mounting and stretched out into the gloom, far across the soggy grass fields that surrounded the old coal building. A small flicker of hope kindled inside of me, the prospect of this ordeal ending like sweet intoxication to my mind. "Maddie, go!" Mark's cry split the night, and I glanced down to find the big one right underneath me, peering into the gap it had made in the stairwell during the previous attack. It slid one massive hand into the breach, and I fumbled to clip the rusted carabiner onto the cable. Click! The second it latched on, I threw myself out the window, and the metal cable whined at my rapid descent. I spun on the end of the nylon strap and twisted my neck to look back at the tower. An explosion ripped through the night. Pillars of flame gushed from the hole in the tower, and the big one let out a loud roar of agony. For one split second, I could see everything silhouetted in darkness. The puppets piling on top of each other in attempt to climb the outer walls. The big one stumbled backwards with its head and arms wreathed in orange flame. And the lower tower, where my best friend had been, coated in thick black smoke. It shrank into the distance until darkness swallowed the terrible scene, and I shut my eyes to let loose a wail of unbearable grief. Deep, rending pain brought scream after scream from me. Loud sobs and cries I would never have emitted around anyone. Wordless sorrow that made me want to die for the emptiness it left in my center. Gone. Mark was gone. A sudden lurch broke me from my weeping, and I looked up to find myself suspended in space, a large, frayed knot in the cable, having stopped me right before a tall, rusty steel pole. The ground lay not far under me, coated in rain-soaked brush and chest-high grass. Was this the exit Mark had spoken of? Or once again had I been foiled, tricked by this awful place into yet another hellish maze? Sniffling, I spun on the end of my harness like a spider on its web and peered into the rainy abyss. Is that a light? My heart jerked, and I gasped between renewed sobs at the dim yet discernible white glow not 200 yards away, across a low-lying section of grassland. It was so close, all I had to do was run to the light and I'd be free. I could go home. Pulling Mark's camping knife from my belt, I sawed at the nylon harness, my nerves grating with each snap of the tiny fibers that brought me closer to the inevitable drop. There, almost. Like an invisible hand had released me, I plummeted downward, my heels slamming into the spongy muck of the wet earth. My butt hit the ground next, and I almost rolled over in a complete somersault, both legs flying up into the air. The arches of both my feet stung, and the wind had been knocked out of me, but I was alive. Somewhere, off to my right, an eerie shriek cackled into the night air, and my blood ran cold. "Oh, come on," I muttered under my breath, exasperated and desperate. I'd come so far, lost so much, but now my way out was right there. Yet still, I would be hunted like a rabbit to the very end. No, not like a rabbit. I'm not dying like that. My hands found Mark's shotgun, and I thumbed the safety off. Through the clearing, the rain fell, the wind hissed, and everything waited for me to make my move. "This is for you, Mark." I darted through the grass. My sore legs moved underneath me with renewed energy, and the field erupted into chaos. From the mud, twisted and distended limbs dragged macabre figures into the light of my headlamp. Not quite puppets, but certainly not human. They were broken and torn, rotten and decayed. But worst of all, they were all the same. "Maddie," they called in a sing-song mockery of his soft voice. The dozens of half-rotted Marks staggering after me, their arms outstretched. Each one bore his face, his mousy hair, his strong arms, even his brown eyes, but without the warmth, the life, the love. They materialized in waves from the grass, the trees, and the muck in various stages of decay, repeating any words the darkness had overheard him saying in a cruel mantra. "Maddie, run. Maddie, please. Maddie, stop." Fear sliced through me, but it paled in comparison to the grief that came with Mark's words being replayed from their vile throats. My eyes blurred with tears at how real they looked. The clotted blood made my heart ache, the horrid wounds like razor blades to my soul, and step by step, sadness overwhelmed my terror. Mark was dead, yet his death now chased me through the tall grass with Cheshire grins and haunting calls, tormenting me for my mistake. A figure popped up right in my path, his back to me, and the Mark aberration snapped his head over backwards so that his chin faced the sky. With the awful crunching of shattered neck bones, he gave me a wide inverted smile. "Strawberry, upside down." He lunged at me, with his decayed arms bent at unnatural angles and a throaty laugh frothed out of his fluid-filled lungs. "Stop it!" The shotgun bucked under my shoulder, and the apparition's head disappeared, black goo misting into the air where it had been. Stifling my own tortured sob, I sidestepped the corpse and ran on, the white light just ahead as more enemies shambled through the grass. They closed in from all sides, so much that I stopped trying to aim the shotgun and simply pumped round after round into every counterfeit Mark that came within range. Pulling the trigger sent a fresh stab of pain into my already destroyed heart. And when they didn't die right away, they screamed with a surprisingly convincing imitation of Mark's pain cries. I had to force myself to shoot, to murder him over and over again. And my raw emotions continued to bleed rivers the entire way. Mottled, dead hands snagged at my green shoulder bag, and I slipped it off without a glance backwards. My scrabbling fingers couldn't find any more shells in the pocket of Mark's jacket, so I wielded the 12 gauge like a club until another apparition caught it by the sling and yanked it away. There were so many of them, the grass so tall, the hands reaching from everywhere, the light seemed so far away. Clammy fingers grabbed a fistful of my loose hair, and I drew the last weapon I had. With a desperate yell, I spun around and plunged Mark's knife into the imitation's face. As soon as it let go, I pushed through the wall of hands, finally able to feel the white light's rays on my face, and threw myself into the grass beyond. My foot plummeted over an unseen bank, and I went down. I rolled through the grass and mud, across a small briar bush and into a shallow water-filled ditch. Rain clambered down around me. My body ached with fatigue, and overhead, the dark storm clouds rumbled with the hidden tongues of lightning. Too exhausted to stand, I lay there in a crumpled heap and shut my eyes, ready for the fiends to rip into me. I waited. Nothing. Daring to open my eyes, I sat up. Aside from the whistle of the wind and the curtains of rain and droning thunder, the shrieks had ceased. The apparitions gone. No one called my name, and I could hear no crashing in the underbrush. Somehow I was alone once again. Confused, I crawled out of the ditch and felt something smooth and hard under my palms. What was that? It felt so familiar. Yet my tired, frazzled mind couldn't place it. So cold. Got to get warm. Have to get warm and dry. I struggled to stand, but fell. My ankles and knees so worn from my ordeal that I could barely move. My skin felt like old rubber. My fingers wouldn't bend, and I shivered uncontrollably. The air began to glow. A loud metallic screeching split the air, and two bright blue orbs stopped not 5 yards away. Whatever new thing was coming for me would have an easy meal. And I struggled back towards the ditch as the lights flooded over me. Footsteps thudded nearer, and I raised my hands to shield myself in the blinding aura of light. Maddie? I flinched. Perhaps the apparitions had followed me after all. A man stepped into view, with brown work boots, dark blue jeans, and a tan Carhartt coat. He had auburn hair like me, and wide, worried eyes that took in my bedraggled appearance with horror and disbelief. No doubt, I looked like someone from a disaster movie, covered in cuts and bruises, my hair in a tangle, wearing mud and blood-smeared clothes that weren't my own, with a vacant stare in my eyes that had seen things too scary to forget. No! I shook my head and scuttled away as best I could. I wasn't gonna fall for this. Not now. Now, Maddie, it's me. The old man edged closer, his hands held out in a show of peace. For God's sake, girl, what happened? It's not him. It's not him. It can't be. You're not real. I dragged myself backwards on numb elbows, too weak to fight, but too hateful to die. You're not. I know what you are. Madison, listen to me. I've been looking for you everywhere. Sweetheart, please. He stepped closer, and I palmed around for a rock, a stick, anything to use as a weapon. I just needed to get one good swing at his head. But there was nothing, except that strange, hard surface that hung on the edge of my mind, as if behind a bank of fog. I had run out of time, and if he was in fact a fake, I might as well go out on my own terms. If you're real, I met his eyes, sky blue like mine, and fought the instinctive urge to cry. Then where did we go for my 12th birthday? The old man crouched down on his heels, and a small, fond smile crossed his face. Cedar Point. Cedar Point. A dam broke inside me, and my eyes pooled with tears I didn't think I could make. I realized in that moment how the sky already seemed clearer, the rain thinner and the thunder more distant. White painted lines on hard black asphalt of Route 42 stretched away into the night, cool and firm beneath my ragged palms. The lights were headlights, and the man crouched in front of me, with two well-worn hands held out. Dad! I tried to crawl to him, and my father scooped me off the asphalt without pause. Crying uncontrollably, I let myself fall apart while he carried me to his truck. Feeling like I'd just woken up from the worst nightmare of my life, the storm faded, and the starry night sky slowly reappeared overhead. And at long last, my fear melted away. over. It was over. At least the easy part was. Every day afterwards became a blur of one horrible situation after another. I was shuffled from the police station to the hospital to a therapist in a loop, forced to retell the same story to the point that I gave up trusting anyone. No one believed me, not even my parents. And I had 3 separate mental breakdowns in the course of a week. At first, the police assumed that I had been brutally assaulted and suspected Mark. When I vehemently disagreed with that, they decided that someone else had attacked me and convinced my parents to have me undergo an invasive, uncomfortable examination at the local emergency clinic to prove them wrong. Sitting in that tiny cold room after the exam was over, I bawled my eyes out, feeling more alone than I ever had in my entire life. Next, the detectives involved with the investigation recruited a therapist who had one too many colors in her attention-desperate butch haircut to put me on a slew of antipsychotics, which I promptly flushed down the toilet. But the real blow came when they confiscated the clothes Mark had given me and said they suspected me of killing him, which almost made me vomit the first time one of them suggested it. Without the old t-shirt, flannel jacket, and wrinkled camouflage pants, all I had to remember Mark was the pink plastic hairbrush, which I'd hidden in my room the night Dad brought me home. I would have strangled the person who tried to take it from me. This whirlwind of speculation fed the rumor mill at New Wilderness, and soon half of my former friends wanted nothing to do with me, assuming I was in fact responsible for Mark's death. The other half treated me like some kind of broken china figurine, convinced that Mark had in fact hurt me, and I was too traumatized to admit it to myself. Even Kendra made snide comments about Mark when she thought I wasn't paying attention, saying she hoped it was hot where he was. I spent the whole day crying in the bathroom after she said that. Soon the story went viral, and people who didn't even know Mark began trashing him online, saying he deserved what he got, that men like him were scum, and I was a classic example of Stockholm Syndrome. More than once, I got into comment fights with such keyboard ghouls, and my outbursts got me banned from several platforms. How anyone could believe he'd done something like that, when I was the primary witness who insisted he'd done nothing wrong, made my blood boil. Then came the funeral. I found myself walking to the tiny gray brick funeral home alone, having begged my dad to stay in the car. He wanted to come with me, now officially vindicated beyond belief that the world was still out to hurt his precious baby girl. And he never went anywhere without his gun tucked in his belt. Still, I made him stay, mainly because I didn't want him to see all the hateful looks I was going to get from the people who loved Mark, and thought of me as nothing more than either the source of his reputational slander or his murderess. It was bad enough that I had to endure their scorn. I didn't want Dad to see it too. My black sweater itched, but it covered me from wrist to neck, made me feel a little more invisible, and didn't stand out in the crowd. I couldn't bring myself to sign the visitor roster, my stomach turning sour just looking at the table with Mark's photograph nestled amongst the white plastic candles. He would have hated the whole thing. The overwhelming aroma of old lady perfume, the soft organ music in the background, and the dollar store quilts with pictures of doves on them. Of course, there was no casket, no body. No one here even knew where Mark Petrick had died. No one but me. The line to the little shrine of pictures that stood in for a coffin was long, and I spent most of the time staring at my scuffled black dress boots, the resentful eyes from around the room enough to burn a hole in my heart. It hurt enough to know that Mark was gone, but to be detested by those who loved him and had been loved by him, that was a new level of torture that I dreaded for days. At last I reached the front, and stepped underneath the little wicker archway. "Hey, stranger. Long time no see." My heart twitched and I choked back tears. Dozens of pictures of him decorated the wicker siding and stood in frames on various stands beneath the arch. Mark smiling at high school graduation. Mark in his green army fatigues fresh out of basic training. Mark at a table in college, sleeping when he should have been studying. Mark embracing a pretty blonde girl who wore a shiny diamond ring on one finger. At last, my eyes settled on Mark in his black New Wilderness uniform shirt, standing with the other veterans during the Veterans Appreciation Day photo shoot. He beamed back at me from the glass frame, proud and gentle, sweet and kind. My best friend and a good man. One I didn't deserve. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out the pink hairbrush, its handle still peppered with a few flecks of his dry blood, and set it beside the picture. It looked odd amongst all the prim and proper gifts, but I knew it would find its way into the right hands. Besides, I felt better seeing it alongside Mark's amazing smile. I turned and found myself at the head of the procession that passed by Mark's waiting family members. His red-eyed father, weeping mother, stoic sisters, and morose brother. At the end of the line stood a pretty blonde girl, that same diamond ring on her finger. Her head hung low with sad, empty eyes glued to the floor. A few older women pushed past me to throw themselves into the arms of Mark's mother, and I used them as a smokescreen to slip away from the rest of the crowd. Coming to stop in front of the blonde girl, I waited till she raised her head, my heart pounding like a trip hammer. "Claire?" She blinked at me, forlorn but calm, as though the girl had already grieved too much to break down on a day like today. Still, in the blue irises that stared back at me, I could see the pain there, the shattered heart of someone who had loved Mark with all her soul, only to have him stolen away without even saying goodbye. I coughed, unsure how to proceed. I'm Madison. Oh." Claire looked at the back of her hands and picked nervously at her thumbnail. "Get it over with so she can have some comfort in hating him." I shut my eyes, picturing Mark's warm grin, and drew in a deep breath. "I was the girl who... I know who you are." A stiff cringe almost snapped my spine, but I opened my eyes to find Claire watching me, not with anger or hatred, but with a small, sympathetic smile. "Mark and I didn't keep secrets from each other. Before we got engaged, he told me about you. He said you made really good cupcakes." Of course he did. I laughed, though it came out as a choked sob. "Strawberry upside down." Claire fought hard against her own tears. She sighed fondly in a way that made me feel a million times worse. "Strawberry upside down." Silence reigned between us, and I didn't know what to say. Her touch on my arm startled me from my stupor. "You were with him when it happened?" My soul writhed, and tears started to roll down my face, hot and salty. How could I tell her the truth? If anyone deserved to know, it was Claire. But how could I even begin to explain what Mark had died for? He braved a terrible unknown, sacrificed everything. His life, his love, his dreams, all for me. And I didn't even know how to put that into words for his grieving fiancée. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I saw desperation there, an excruciating need to know the truth. I nodded. Claire shut her eyes and grimaced against the agony that must have been welling up inside her chest.
How did he die?
You're 1 in a million, Maddie. Mark's voice echoed in my mind with a thunderclap of clarity, and I forced myself to return Claire's sad gaze.
Protecting me.
A flash of pride crossed the pretty features of Claire's face. She made a valiant attempt to grin once more.
That sounds like him.
We both chuckled through our torment, but I knew I had one last thing to do.
It's my fault.
The truth ripped from me like a knife, and I couldn't stop myself sobbing. The pain in my chest too much to bear.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't know.
She wrapped me in a tight hug before I could say anything more, and I felt moist tears on my shoulder as we mourned together. There was no insincerity in her embrace, no reservation or faux kindness, just the empathy of someone who hurt for the same reason I did. With the whole world watching, my internal protective walls crumbled, and I wept with Claire over the man who had changed our lives forever. We talked and shared stories about Mark for the rest of the night, until Dad wandered in to make sure I was okay. Claire turned out to be really nice, and we decided to stay in touch. The first real friendship I'd had since that awful night. I figured Mark would have wanted that, for both of us. All that was 4 months ago. 4 months. It feels like a horrible lifetime. Someone else's life. A foreign dream where I don't belong, but I'm trapped in all the same. That's why I volunteered to take Mark's place in the Night Rangers. At first, everyone in the entire park was against it, but I begged Randy, the head of security, until he finally agreed out of sheer pity. Of course, my parents were furious, but they knew they couldn't stop me, not after I told them I'd go even if I had to walk. I know no one else will understand, but the instant I saw the position come up for new applicants, I knew it had to be me. Even now, sitting here in the company truck next to the visitor center, I can hear thunder booming in the distance as the sky grows darker, and the lightning rippled in the clouds, calling to me with cruel anticipation. My father's Armalite rifle is propped up on the passenger seat, along with a canvas bandolier full of loaded magazines. The necklace that my grandmother got for me is around my neck, so I'd have something to sacrifice if I made it that far. In the event that I don't, my grandpa's old bowling ball bag holds a steel pressure cooker filled with jellied gasoline, the outside covered with taped-on framing nails and several batteries wired to a digital baking timer. I suppose the FBI will freak if they ever find these posts, but they don't have to worry. I'm not after them. If you're reading this, Dad, Mom, I love you. I hope I can tell you in the morning, but if not, then understand that this isn't suicide. Not technically. I'm doing my job as a ranger. That thing killed my best friend, and if someone doesn't stop it, it's only a matter of time before the big one takes more innocent people. It's only a matter of time before the big one takes more innocent people. Mark knew that, and it cost him everything. And I can't let his death be in vain. To anyone else who happens to stumble upon this final excerpt of my sad little tale, I hope you live your life well. Soak up the sun. Find a job you love. And most importantly, hold on to the people who care about you. You never know when you're going to lose them. And if you are ever around the New Wilderness Wildlife Reserve on a stormy, rainy night, please stay away from Tauerpin Road. Hey, this is Jay Taylor from Dante's Disciples, and that is the third and final part of Stay Away from Tauerpin Road, written by Random Appalachian 468. Please make sure you check him out on Reddit Nosleep. What a phenomenal story. Um, I'll do my normal request for a like and a sub and a share. I really enjoy taking the time to read these, but as I've mentioned in the other videos, competition with artificial narrators is huge, so if you like this and my voice and my reading, then please, again, share it so we can get these numbers up and I can keep going. And if you don't like my voice or there's something I can do to improve, you can let me know that too. Again, my name is Jay Taylor, and this is Dante's Disciples.